The Wrong Ride, A Twist of Fate and Family Secrets. Part 1, The Mistaken Ride. Chapter 1, A Stormy Night. Lena's desperate rush. The rain hammered against the car window, distorting Lena Carter's reflection as she drummed her fingers on the glass. The clock ticked relentlessly. She was late, and her sister Claire's engagement party was the last place she wanted to be. The world of the Whitmores, with its polished smiles and hidden agendas, had never welcomed Lena, and the gap between her and Claire had only widened since the engagement announcement. Lena's phone buzzed with a text. She braced herself, already anticipating the irritation behind the words. "Claire, you're really not coming, are you?" Lena's lips tightened. She is coming. But traffic was a nightmare, and now she was stranded in the middle of a storm with no ride in sight. Then, as if fate itself had heard her frustration, a sleek black car slid into view, the door swinging open like a silent invitation. "Is this my ride?" she murmured to herself, barely pausing before slipping inside. A stranger in the shadows. The moment Lena closed the door, a heavy silence wrapped around her. The car interior reeked of luxury, polished leather, expensive cologne, and something else. Danger. A man sat across from her, his sharp eyes gleaming in the dim light. The way he held himself, relaxed yet vigilant, spelled confidence, bordering on arrogance. A crisp, dark suit that could have been tailored for a king, and a smirk that made her pulse quicken. Lena didn't need to ask, she already knew. "You're not my driver," she blurted, her heart hammering in her chest. His lips curled into a knowing grin. "Number. But since you're already here, why not stay?" His voice was smooth, dangerous, the kind that seemed to wrap around her like silk but had a hidden edge. Daniel Kane. Her stomach dropped as he studied her with an intensity that felt too familiar. "Do I know you?" she asked, leaning back, her body tensing. "No," he replied simply, his gaze never leaving hers. "But I know about you, and I know about the Whitmores." A warning in disguise. The car pulled forward, the sound of the rain becoming a muffled backdrop to the charged silence between them. Kane's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, but his attention never strayed from Lena. He spoke in cryptic half-truths, his words like breadcrumbs, leading her deeper into a labyrinth she didn't want to enter. He casually mentioned Claire's fiancé, James Whitmore, the perfect golden boy, heir to an empire built on secrets. He dropped hints about the Whitmores' real business, about deals made behind closed doors, and things that could destroy everything Lena thought she knew. Lena couldn't tell if he was toying with her or trying to warn her. "You trying to scare me?" she snapped, her voice sharp. Kane's smirk deepened, the challenge in his eyes never wavering. "Number. I'm trying to warn you." Her chest tightened. Was this man a part of it? Was he in on the secrets? Or was he just another piece of the puzzle? The car glided to a stop outside the Whitmore estate. Lights blazed from every window, the sounds of music and laughter spilling out into the stormy night. The grandeur of the mansion loomed like an uninviting fortress. Lena's fingers brushed the door handle, but she hesitated, a chill creeping up her spine. Kane's gaze was steady on her, and there was something in his eyes, a quiet warning. "This is just the beginning," he murmured, barely loud enough to hear over the rain. His words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Lena could feel it. Whatever game Kane was playing, he was right. This night would change everything. And she was already in too deep. What secrets could the Whitmores be hiding? And what part does Daniel Kane play in Lena's tangled fate? As the night unfolds, Lena must navigate a web of lies, betrayal, and family secrets, and figure out if she can trust the mysterious man who's suddenly become her unlikely companion. Chapter 2, The Gilded Cage. A party she was never meant to attend. The Grand Aurora Hotel, a world that isn't hers. The Grand Aurora Hotel was a towering monument to wealth, gleaming like a gilded cage. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow over champagne towers that shimmered under the lights. The clink of glass, The murmur of polite conversation, every detail screamed affluence, a world that Lena was never meant to be part of. The air was thick with expectation, and Lena felt like an outsider, a fish out of water. Her thrift store dress clung to her frame, a stark contrast to the polished gowns surrounding her. Every polite smile from the guests felt like a silent judgment, a reminder that she didn't belong here, that she was the wrong kind of person in the wrong kind of world. She quickly found herself standing by the door, surveying the sea of perfectly groomed faces when Claire appeared. She was the picture of elegance, dressed in a flawless gown that cost more than Lena's entire wardrobe. Claire's eyes locked onto her, and Lena could see the tension building in her sister's face. Her fingers tightened around the flute of champagne she held like a lifeline. Claire, text message. You came. The words weren't welcoming. There was no relief, no warmth, just resignation. Claire had expected her not to show up. Lena forced a tight smile, her stomach sinking. Wouldn't miss it. Claire's gaze flicked briefly over Lena's dress, a thin, disapproving line forming on her lips. Try not to embarrass me. Lena's heart dropped. She had never felt more out of place in her life. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room as the clinking of glasses and laughter echoed like mocking whispers. The devil in a suit. And then he appeared. Daniel Kane. Lena barely had time to register his presence before she felt the weight of his gaze. He stood at the base of the grand staircase, an almost predatory figure, leaning casually against the railing. His sharp eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, everything else in the room seemed to fade. The crowd parted around him, like he was the eye of the storm, and Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Claire's face went pale at the sight of him, her champagne glass almost slipping from her hand. What is he doing here? Claire hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. Lena frowned, not understanding. You know him? Claire's voice dropped to an almost venomous whisper. That's Daniel Kane. His family ruined ours. Lena's mind raced. What was Claire talking about? How could someone like Daniel Kane be the villain in her sister's perfect world? But before she could ask more questions, the Whitmores made their entrance, their polished smiles like masks of venomous charm. The Whitmores' welcome, or lack thereof. Mr. Whitmore, tall and imposing, extended his hand with a smile that felt too tight, too forced. Ah, the other Carter sister, he said, his voice as cold as the marble floors beneath them. Lena gritted her teeth, fighting the urge to pull her hand away. Nice to meet you, she managed through gritted teeth. But Mrs. Whitmore, a woman whose laughter could freeze the warmest of rooms, chimed in, her tone dripping with condescension. How quaint of you to come, she said, her eyes scanning Lena's dress like it was some sort of oddity. Lena's skin prickled, the weight of their scrutiny sinking deep into her. They didn't want her here. They never did. She wasn't a part of this world, no matter how hard Claire tried to fit her in. Before Lena could process any of it, the hum of conversations around them grew quiet. The air seemed to thicken as Kane's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. The truth drops like a bomb. Funny, Kane's voice rang out from across the room, smooth and deliberate. I didn't see your name on the guest list, Lena. A sharp silence descended. All eyes turned to her, some curious, others judgmental. Lena felt her heart stop. The room seemed to tilt as her chest tightened. She hadn't been invited. The truth hit her like a punch to the gut. Her own sister, Claire, hadn't wanted her there. Lena was nothing more than an unwanted guest in a world that had never accepted her. Claire's face twisted in guilt, her eyes flickering nervously between Lena and the gathering crowd. The Whitmores exchanged glances, their satisfaction clear in their cold, smug smiles. Lena's stomach churned. Why hadn't Claire told her? Kane, standing nearby, watched the entire scene unfold with an expression that was almost sympathetic. He raised his glass to her, his eyes never leaving hers. To secrets, he murmured, his voice low and knowing. Lena's mind raced as she realized the truth. Kane was the only one who had been honest with her. And this night, This party was just the beginning of a much darker story. As Lena grapples with the devastating truth about her sister's betrayal, she must navigate a world of lies, secrets, and buried family scandals. With Daniel Kane lurking in the shadows, could the wealthy elite be hiding more than just their dirty laundry? And, more importantly, could Lena ever trust Kane, a man who seems to know far too much about her and her family? Chapter 3. The Truth Hurts. A broken exit. The hotel doors slammed shut behind Lena as she stepped into the night, the cold air slicing through her like a blade. Her chest burned with a mixture of humiliation, betrayal, and an all-consuming rage. Uninvited, unwanted. The weight of the night pressed down on her, each step on the wet pavement echoing her isolation. She didn't belong here, never had. Her sister, the Whitmores, the entire world she had tried so hard to fit into, it was all a lie. Footsteps echoed behind her, the sound too distinct to ignore. Lena spun around, fury surging in her veins, expecting to see one of the Whitmores chasing her down with more cruel words. Instead, it was him. Kane's warning. "You can't outrun the truth, Lena." Kane's voice cut through the silence, smooth and confident, as though he had known she would bolt the moment she learned the truth. Lena's pulse quickened as she whirled on him, her face flushed with anger. "What do you want from me?" His smirk was infuriating, the kind of smile that made her want to punch him in the face. "The same thing you do." "Answers." Lena's hands clenched at her sides, her fists trembling with a mix of fury and confusion. Why was he so smug? Why was he so sure of himself when the world around her was falling apart? Kane stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers, the streetlights casting shadows on his sharp features. "The Whitmores aren't just rich, Lena. They're dangerous." Lena scoffed, her breath catching in her throat. "And I should trust you instead?" Kane's gaze hardened, his expression a study in dark amusement. "Number. But you should ask yourself why your sister was so afraid of me being here." Lena froze, her mind racing. Why? Claire had been terrified when she saw Kane. The fear in her eyes had been unmistakable. It wasn't just about him. It was about what he knew. Lena's ultimatum. Lena took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "Prove it," she demanded, her voice trembling with frustration. "Give me one real reason to believe you." Kane's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a sly grin. He reached into his coat with a deliberate slowness that made Lena's skin crawl. Without warning, he dropped a folded newspaper clipping into her hand. The edges yellowed with age. Lena stared at the headline, her blood running cold. It was an old scandal, one that her father had been involved in decades ago. A scandal buried by the Whitmores, a scandal that had wrecked her family's reputation. "Your father didn't just leave, Lena. He was pushed out." Kane's voice was low, almost a whisper. "And the Whitmores were the ones who did it." The world seemed to stop around her. Her breath caught in her throat as she read the headline again, unable to process the weight of it. Her father's downfall. It had never made sense. But this was the missing piece of the puzzle. An alliance forged in distrust. The cold night air felt heavier now, as if the weight of the truth was pressing down on her. Her fingers tightened around the newspaper clipping, the crinkling sound loud in the stillness. "You know," Kane continued, his tone shifting to something darker, more calculating, "I need someone on the inside. Someone who can get me the information I need." Lena's mind was racing. He's using me. She hated it. She hated him. But the fire of her anger was quickly replaced by something else. A cold, unyielding sense of purpose. She needed answers. And Kane? Kane was the key to unlocking them. She stared him down, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. "Fine. But the second you screw me over," Kane cut her off with a quiet chuckle, his eyes gleaming in the dark. "You'll stab me in the back." Understood. His grin was sharp, dangerous. "But don't think for a second that I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart, Lena. You need the truth just as much as I do." Lena took a breath, holding his gaze. They both knew this was no act of trust, it was survival. The truth wasn't going to come easy. She had no idea what Kane's real motives were, but she had no choice now. They shook hands, the grip firm and unyielding. Neither one of them let go first.